Muchas gracias a todos por asistir. Bienvenidos a The Cognitive Podcast, Ideas en Spanglish. Estoy junto a Jordan.
Hello, I'm Jordan Cohen.
Estamos aquí hoy día para debatir, obviamente en un Spanglish, sobre la educación online versus la presencial. Claramente con la pandemia y todo, hoy día lo online es lo que manda finalmente. Obvio también en Cognitive, todos nuestros cursos han sido online. ¿Desde cuándo estamos funcionando online así al 100%?
March 15th or March 16th. O sea, el primer día cuando... no sé si eso fue el día en que empezó la cuarentena, sino que el día en que decidimos que, parece que tenemos que ir a casa y ahí empezó.
That's the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes things happen in learning or in life that you don't expect, and you've got to learn how to deal with that. And that's something that it's not just true in doing classes or in a business, but it's also true like when you're doing anything difficult things and chaos happens, things you don't expect happen, you have to learn how to respond to those difficulties. So I think we did a great job. I think it's been difficult for everybody. Anyone listening to this, I'm sure you've had an experience where, nobody expected this. And so, this is, I totally understand if you had a really difficult time with this, but also, it's an opportunity, and that's not just a cliche. It's an opportunity for you to see, take a look at what's important in your life. And also it's an opportunity for you just to respond to difficult circumstances. And so, I would call Joaquin a difficult circumstance for us. But we'll talk about this now, about online, about doing classes online. But it's been maybe the best thing that's ever happened to us. We could talk about that.
Sí, obvio, en el fondo sacarle provecho a la situación y tener en mente que shit happens es parte de la vida finalmente. Para contar un poco, antes de las clases online clases, lo primero que había era cursos por correo. Yo creo que esa fue la primera introducción, antes que Zoom, antes que clases grabadas en YouTube, que todo eran cursos por correo y de repente podían ser escritos, quizás en los 40, 50, cuando de hecho los primeros fueron en implementar quizás en educación remota, fueron militares para ciertas capacitaciones. Entonces me imagino que en un principio eran manuales, cursos, cosas así, y con el tiempo ya, no sé, cuando quizás la televisión era algo como más común en casa, me acuerdo que esto sí lo alcancé a ver, no porque los vendieran, sino que creo que en alguna casa, no sé, en la feria quizás vi que vendían cursos en CDs que te llegaban a la casa. Cursos de cualquier cosa, o también, no sé, yo me acuerdo que mi primer curso de inglés era un curso que tenía una tía, que eran unos cómics, y tú ponías un cassette que iban narrando el cómic. Entonces tú podías ir viendo. Dime.
It was a like an ebook, or did you learn how to do something in the course?
Ebook, no. En ese tiempo no habían computadores. Era un cómic. Sí, era una historieta.
The first version of an ebook.
Claro, era una historieta de un par de niños que estaban aprendiendo inglés, pero no sé si eran niños que ya sabían inglés, pero estaban como en kinder, entonces como que les estaban enseñando las palabras, estaban como aprendiendo cómo escribir, cosas así. Entonces el cómic te iba narrando un poco la historia de ellos y tú ponías un cassette y los escuchabas hablar y qué sé yo. Yo recuerdo que eso quizás fue mi primer curso remoto y más encima de inglés. Después con el tiempo se hicieron estudios que la retención, bueno, no, saltando el tema, continuándolo, se hicieron estudios de que la retención de las clases en línea versus las clases presenciales podían tener el mismo nivel de efectividad. Pero, ¿qué es lo que pasa? Y es lo que uno se da cuenta hoy en día, es que se pierde un poco la individualidad de las personas. Pero no es tan descabellado pensar eso si en general lo que hablamos como hace 2 podcasts, que tú me contabas que la educación desde la edad industrial, desde la revolución industrial, donde se intentó como estandarizar todo el proceso, las clases en línea en un principio, o estos cursos o clases grabadas, es como, no hay nada más estandarizado que eso. Si es un video de alguien hablando de repente, hoy en día cambiamos un poco esa modalidad donde tenemos a alguien que está enseñando. Entonces, queda muy claro que se pierde un poco la individualidad de cada persona. Si a alguien le cuesta un poco más aprender, quizás en una clase grabada no va a ser lo mejor, a menos que tenga como un profesor en algún curso pequeño donde sí se puedan ver las necesidades de cada uno.
When you refer to the lack of personalization in online courses, I find that curious. So what do you mean by that? Are you referring specifically to like the massive open online courses?
Yes.
Like on Udemy and Coursera?
Sí, todo eso en general son clases grabadas principalmente. Nunca he tomado muchos cursos en línea y creo que ninguno ha sido como con un profesor que se siente frente a mí y me explique. Siempre es como alguien que ya grabó el tópico y uno ve el video.
Okay. Yes, I think this would be a great moment to discuss how online courses work and the 2 types of online course that you could take, or 2 types of online instruction that you receive. The
Sure.
2 types are asynchronous and synchronous.
All right.
Okay. Asynchronous is like what you're referring to, where when the student, or let's talk about it from the teacher's perspective, when the teacher is instructing the students, it's not happening live. It's sometimes it's recorded. It's a recorded video before the student actually watches it. It doesn't have to actually include a recorded video. It could include kind of like a list of tasks that the student has to do. It could be anything in which the teacher is instructing or teaching somebody, but it's not happening in real time. And the obvious benefits of kind of asynchronous teaching or asynchronous learning is that the teacher can do it at any time and can put it together, let's say, more thoughtfully, because when you're in the moment, you're doing the best you can with the tools you have in the moment. But when you can watch something and edit it, you can try and perfect it. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Que eso sí veo como un plus o una ventaja de repente a estos cursos ya grabados, porque se tiene el tiempo de pensar, ok, quizás esto no lo expliqué tan bien, lo voy a volver a hacer, y en una forma de, claro, tener la mejor comunicación posible. Pero claro, también en Udemy generalmente no son todos expertos. De repente, si los cursos son muy baratos, es alguien como que sabe y dijo, voy a hacer un curso nomás. Entonces, de repente tampoco son los mejores profesores o los más certificados para hacer clases. Entonces, yo creo que de repente, ya no quiero generalizar, pero de repente ellos quizás matan un poco el concepto a veces de clase en línea. Porque claro, quizás alguien que no conoce algo, primera vez que va a tomar una clase en línea, y se mete a Udemy, que yo no creo que sea un lugar malo para partir, pero quizás encontraste un curso malo, quizás vaya a decir, ok, todos los cursos online son malos. Y creo que hoy en día se ha quitado un poco el estigma de las clases en línea. Por ejemplo, conozco muchos conocidos, sobre todo hoy día en LinkedIn, todos publican sus cursos. Hice este curso en Coursera, en Udemy, todos están haciendo cursos de todo, y antes era algo que no se veía. Yo me acuerdo que, no sé, mis primeros cursos de marketing fueron en línea, compré un emprendedor, qué sé yo, Entonces me decían, pero ¿y eso tiene certificación? ¿Quién lo avala? ¿No está respaldado por una universidad? Como que era súper, como muy, no. Y hoy en día los veo a todos ahí haciendo lo mismo. Entonces, ¿de quién se ríen ahora?
Well, and also the universities, at least in the universities in the United States, got into the game through, I think it was through iTunes or through Apple. It's something like iUniversity. I don't remember the name of it, but Yale, Harvard, and some of the most prestigious institutions started putting courses online that just like Udemy and Coursera.
Do you know
and ultimately, let's be honest, this is where all universities are going. All universities are going to eventually be, if they even survive, which is an interesting question, all universities are going to go online because of cost, because of and because
time,
yeah, exactly.
That's what you said. If they adapt and survive, that's I think where they're going. Did you know that the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has all of their classes online available?
I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me because I mean, really, universities. The value people spend in the United States an immense amount of money on universities.
How much does the university?
MIT, I believe, is so I think MIT costs about $45,000 a year. So that's $180,000, which is like 140 or 150 palos.
Como escuchar ese monto me duele.
Right, and that's 4 years. So that's undergraduate. So then if you want to go back to graduate school, it's the same. It's just as much or maybe more. And this is now you can start to imagine, if you didn't know those numbers before, you can start to imagine the debt crisis for recently graduated students, what we're talking about. Like,
I know that
people are indebted for the rest of their lives.
Yes, I know that you can file bankruptcy on student loans on the United States.
It's well, I mean, it's a topic maybe for the next podcast or for another podcast. But it's crazy. Ultimately, I think the most important thing to know in terms of how online classes work is that it is very much in doubt whether it's necessary for universities to do synchronous classes. And even the point I brought up before is even it's in doubt whether the university experience as we know it in 2020 is even close to worth what people pay for it. And ultimately, what the big question is,
let me clarify.
The big question is whether a university is really that the value of the university experience of paying for that is really just that you've passed a certain gate, like there are gatekeepers, right? And if they open the door to you, and then that's a strong signal to potential employers that of your employability, and it is also a social status symbol, and so there is clear value, but not in the way that we thought about universities maybe 50 years ago. Perhaps that's the big question: is the value in actually gaining skills, knowledge that you can then use immediately afterward in the labor force, and that question is being discussed vigorously, particularly in the United States because of how expensive it is.
I think that, well, first to clarify, the 2020 university experience, it's only online. A cousin of mine entered university this year, and he's been really struggling because, I don't know, le va bien y todo, but he feels like it's, I don't know, another school year. when I first started, it felt like quinto medio, por así decirlo. Porque quizás el primer año no se ve tanto distinto y bueno, en general yo creo que el primer año como que es más la experiencia de ir presencial y hoy en día como que le quitas eso, es como otro curso más simplemente. Y más adelante, lo que tú decías es que en general las universidades son como estos gatekeepers. Quizá en español no se conoce tanto ese concepto. Gatekeeper sería como el ente regulador, por así decirlo. Que te da, claro, de hace 20 años, siempre el paradigma... Salud. Siempre el paradigma fue...
Thank you.
Sácate buenas notas, entra a una buena universidad para que tengas una buena pega. Entonces, ese paradigma siento que hoy en día quizás no se ha dado tanto. Cada vez, bueno, no sé si es porque hoy día uno tiene como más acceso a las redes y todo eso, pero siento que hoy en día hay mucha gente como que intenta emprender, que intenta hacer ciertas cosas, muchos profesionales que quizás estudiaron algo y no se están dedicando a lo que hicieron, quizás como yo, pero no sé, encuentro muy distinto a cómo se lleva un poco el hecho de ok, quizás entrar a la universidad ya no es lo que era hace, como tú decías, 20, 50 años, donde quizás de repente sí marca una diferencia. Yo tengo más que claro que los doctores, abogados, ingenieros aeroespaciales y cosas así, me imagino que obviamente si quieres hacer eso vas a tener que estudiarlo, pero de repente si quieres, no sé, te quieres dedicar a ventas, a temas de marketing, a otras cosas, son muchos que puedes estudiar por las tuyas ni nada de eso. El tema es que quizás cuando llegas a la entrevista, claro, tienes algo como que acredita, porque si alguien te dice, oh no, yo leí esto en un blog y como que por eso quiero hacer esto, es como pésima referencia. Entonces quizás de repente ahí está que quizás los empleadores no siempre hacen las preguntas correctas para el cargo y se basan mucho de repente en los currículums. No creo que se dé tanto eso ahora, pero yo creo que eso también puede ser como un factor de por qué de repente el tener un grado, un título académico, qué sé yo, te marcaba una diferencia. Creo que
no, I think what you say is true. That and I think it's particularly salient to just recognize that how universities were thought of before and what we used them before. And then the question is now what do we use them for? My main what I thought while you were saying, well, clearly doctors, aerospace engineers, people in like the hard sciences and in the skill professions, right? They need that experience. And my immediate thought was, I don't know about that. I mean, I know that you clearly need to be prepared for those industries. The question is, does the university as it's configured today, and with the things that the university focuses on today, is it actually producing skilled laborers and skilled and people who can perform at a high level in difficult scenarios? And I think every year, I think the answer is more doubtful.
Yeah. Sí, por ejemplo, vea, caso hipotético. Te tienes que operar o algo. Y, no sé, 10, 20 años en el futuro, te tienes que operar o algo. Y te atiende, no sé, un doctor que es de la generación de doctores que tuvo toda su carrera online. Como que siento que, no sé, por muy pro a estas modalidades y todo que soy, siento que igual como que tendría cierto recelo a decir, ya, ok, el doctor que tomó todas sus clases online, sí, que me opere nomás, que me abra. Entonces yo igual siento...
Well, what do you think they'd be missing? What do you think they'd be missing?
The practice, I think. the actual practice.
Okay, so then the question is, how do they practice? How do you have students practice, right? And not just practice. Remember, go back to practice perfect, right? It's not just about them practicing, but it's also about receiving and then using feedback. That's maybe somewhat more complicated, perhaps, on the online experience. And it's about kind of seeing a model do it first. So all of those things I think can be replicated. The problem is more than anything. The problem is that we haven't done it really before.
Yeah,
particularly the synchronous learning, particularly synchronous. We haven't done it before. We don't have experience doing it. Teachers, it's like a whole new world for them. Now it's a very different experience, but the truth and this actually, I know we were probably looking for some like ribbon to take us back to the original topic, like we do every podcast so far. The truth is that there are very clear benefits to being online, to teaching online versus teaching before. I'll give you one very clear example, okay? And I think this is indisputable.
Tell me.
What teacher, and maybe I don't, you don't have a lot of experience teaching, but as a student you can imagine, okay? What teacher has not wished deeply in some moment of some class that they could press a button and mute every student in the classroom?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like a power. It's like a godly power that has just been given to all teachers on the face of the earth. Right? Is that they literally, with boop, touching one button on their keyboard, they can silence every student in the classroom. Now that may be funny, but it's also extremely useful from an instructional standpoint. And it doesn't just end there. For example. Right now, where is your focus? Where is your attention? So, I mean, it could be elsewhere, right? But if I'm in front of, if I'm teaching this, where's your focus? Your focus is on this screen in front of you. I'm drawing like a rectangle box, like the size of the screen that's in front of us.
All right.
Right? Like Pulp Fiction, exactly. So what that means is simply that whereas normally in a classroom, the teacher is in the front of the classroom and someone has peripheral vision, right? So they can see everything that's happening around them, and there are many things happening around them. In this case, their attention, their focus is they're way more focused on just this part where you have your head and your mouth. And so you can direct their attention to a much greater degree than you could direct their attention in a live scenario. Also, from an English speaking perspective, if I want somebody to see how I pronounce something, I can do this,
claro,
right? And you can see my mouth, right? You can see I'm for those listening, I'm talking directly into the camera with my mouth right next to the camera. Okay, so you can focus someone's attention just on your mouth. You can't do that in person unless you can direct everyone toward your mouth, but you can't just give focus their attention.
Siento que igual no sé, en persona igual sería invasivo, así como hablarle a la distancia que uno puede hablarle a la cámara.
Yes. But yeah, and that actually is an important point, because that's where some of the negatives actually come in for or the benefits of having an in-person experience versus an online experience, which is that in person many more of your senses are activated. So when somebody speaks in person, you can hear and you can hear their you can hear the sonic waves or the sound waves. You can feel it, right? There's something you feel happening. When there's sunlight happening on the teacher and you can feel the sunlight, it's a much more like primary experience. And I can, and for example, I can scream really loudly here on this podcast or in Zoom, but the power of my voice is not as I can't use, that's not as sharp a tool as in person, for example. And then there are other examples like that. I know that this is kind of controversial, but even the power of touch, just where you high five a student, for example, or you hit the table like, damn, that was awesome, right? It has there are tools. The big idea here is that there are tools that you have that are way more powerful online, and there are tools that you have that are way more powerful in person. And what's happening right now to teachers all across the world is they're just trying to learn how to use these new tools that they've never used before in their lives.
I think that one of the main issues is precisely that muchos juzgan de repente las clases en línea diciendo no, pero es que son malas y no, es que en el fondo siento que no se han ajustado, es decir, intentan llevar el modelo presencial a un modelo en línea, no sé, durando la hora y media que dura una clase, es loco, no es posible de repente estar tanto tiempo y a veces de repente estar todo el día quizás en clases en línea, pero claro, yo siento que esto es nuestro primer approach on how to do online classes, and eventually we as a society will get better on online teaching because now we're forced to do it. No, entonces la gente se tiene que sacar estos tapujos, ¿cómo se dice? Se me fue la palabra, preconcepciones de que quizás, claro, pues ahora todos están forzados a tomar clases en línea, es lo que hay, entonces se tienen que quitar ese estigma de, quizás las clases en línea ahora quizás no funcionan, veamos cómo podemos hacerlas funcionar de mejor forma. Es lo mismo quizás las primeras veces, no sé, para mí no hubo una transición de que los profesores llegaran y usaran un proyector en el colegio, sino que lo vi más en la universidad. Pero hoy en día, no sé, hay muchos profesores que incluso en los colegios usan proyectores para explicar ciertas cosas, y antes me imagino que estaban los puristas que decían, no, pero es que si uno lo escribía a mano, el alumno como que se conecta más con la cosa. Entonces es un tema de tecnología, siempre va a haber cierta resistencia en un principio y nos vamos a ir moviendo finalmente a las circunstancias. Vamos a ver también las ventajas que tenemos. Por ejemplo, igual lo que más nos dicen nuestros cognitivers es que les encantan también las clases en línea porque tienen su hora y están listos, no tienen que viajar de repente. Entonces, sobre todo para quienes son profesionales, unas buenas clases en línea son la raja, porque tienes tu clase en línea, puedes continuar con tu vida, con tu trabajo y seguir haciendo otras cosas sin tener que perder el tiempo de, dura una o 2 horas la clase, más 1 o 2 horas de viaje, listo, ya perdí 4. Entonces ya no se da eso. Entonces ahora, por ejemplo, nosotros, las horas de clase es la hora de clase. Y uno creería que quizás en línea se pierde un poco algo. Yo siento que son súper, pese a que son en línea las clases que he estado, son súper intensas igual.
Yeah, like there are other costs, like for example, parking, and the worry that like what's going to happen with my car, and there are all kinds of other costs associated that don't exist online. But when people worry about, the worry about the intensity and speed of the class is very logical, because we were worried about that too.
Sure.
Right? Like we had some preconceived notions before the quarantine about online classes, and we had worked so hard as a team to teach the hell out of classes. We trained every day on instruction. We practiced techniques. We do role playing with each other. And all of those were focused on in person. I'll give you two techniques, for example, that we just cannot do, that we trained all the time, that we cannot do online. Number one is called threshold, which is that you meet students at the door, and you say hello to them, and you direct them to where to sit down, so that you can start the class exactly on time, right? Because we are, one of the things that's really important to us in cognitive is that, well, our mission is to get students more fluent faster. And the way that they get more fluent faster is by practicing, and not just knowing, but practicing in difficult scenarios and getting as much practice time as possible. So that means for us, every second of the session experience, of the course experience, is important. We don't want to lose, in the beginning of the class, we don't sit around and say, hey, how are you doing? How is your week? Because the question is, are we getting students more fluent faster by doing that? And we only have a little bit of time to do it with our cognitivers. So we want to take advantage of every second. With threshold, when you meet students at the door and you say, okay, Joaquin, welcome. How did you do the practice? Awesome. Sit down and get started on this, right? When we do that, immediately the class starts at 7. If the class starts at 7, it starts at 7. And we can't do that. There's no threshold here online. Another technique that we've trained quite a bit is called circulate.
Yes,
and that's the idea that right. The circulate is the idea that in a traditional classroom, the teacher stands in the front of the class, right? And with where the board is, where their desk is, and they don't pass that plane. They just stand there and they don't pass the plane, right? And so circulate is about passing that plane and moving in a random way throughout the classroom, so that you can see the work that students are doing and give them feedback if necessary. Also, so that they know that at any moment, whether that you might be right behind them. And also, it's to know that there's a leader in the class, and that you, as the teacher or coach, that they're in your classroom, right? And that you're going to, and that there are certain rules to be they're expected to follow, and there's a certain level standard of quality of work that they're expected to do.
One way that
we can't circulate online.
One way that
breakout rooms.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. One way that might have been somewhat adapted is the breakout rooms. And in the breakout rooms,
that's right.
For the people that are listening, that maybe cognitivers, maybe not, the breakout rooms on some activities, you split the groups and you put a student to practice on each other. And the teacher just goes around, enters one of the breakout rooms, see what's up, and maybe goes change. I'm doing a lot of gestures for the people that are only listening, not watching on YouTube. I always do a lot of gestures when I speak.
Me too. I'm Jewish, and in New York, Jewish and Italian people are just, we always speak with a lot of gestures also. So I do the same thing. So actually it's funny that you say that, because we often get the comments that from people who are considering taking classes with us, that they're worried about the number of people in the class. And I totally understand, because when you do a meeting and you have 10 people in the meeting or 15 people in the meeting, it's boring. It's impossible to speak. You have to wait for a while, and it's just it's a very, how should you put it? How should we put it? It's a very kind of inert
but
process.
I feel that's because the traditional meetings have been just moved to Zoom, so that problems are just enhanced by the non-presence. But I think if you never actually reviewed how the meetings works or have a standard on meetings, you will get, the problems will be enhanced and you won't be actually doing much on those meetings.
Right. This is kind of like Megan's article on LinkedIn that she wrote recently, which was about how to practice. It's not just important that you practice or focusing on what to practice. It's just as important or more important to focus on how you practice. Actually, the truth and what I was saying is that, you know, that there's a concern about a lot of like if there are a lot of people in the class, it's going to be, the more people, the worse. And that's not just true on Zoom. People are worried about that in classes in live classes as well. But the truth is actually that in our classes, and the ugly truth is that the more people, the better. And it's because, and the reason is simply that we're preparing you to play in the real world, and in the real world, chaos happens. People say things that you didn't expect, like in this exact Zoom call. Whether people have heard me or not, heard it or not, there are people screaming behind me, and people walking by, right? And so this is all these things happen in the real world. Maybe not inside of a controlled classroom, but in the real world. So when you have more students, there's more chaos. But if you know what you're doing and you know how to practice, you can take that controlled chaos and you can use it to and with the help of breakout rooms, with the help of all different types of things, so that people are constantly doing work inside of their heads and constantly doing work throughout the class that helps them get more fluent and faster. And actually, this is why our students constantly tell us that these classes feel like these are different from any classes they've ever taken before. And the main reason they say that, or the number one thing that comes next, is because they're so fast and they're so intense. And it's not just como clases intensivas en el sentido de que hay como muchas horas, sino que las clases son intensas. Sí. Como desde el momento que entras al momento que sales, es intensa, es una experiencia intensa, estás trabajando todo el tiempo.
A mí me gusta, más que decir una clase, bueno, para mí una clase como intensivo en general es asociado como a muchas horas, harta práctica, qué sé yo. Pero a mí me gusta más
es cantidad de horas nomás.
Claro, a mí me gusta más el concepto, quizás no es el concepto quizás más positivo, pero me gusta decir como de repente que una clase es densa. Es decir, so much content and stuff happen in the class that's dense. I don't know if that's a good one, but cuando pasan ese tipo de clases, a mí me gusta decir que son densas.
Totally. And then why is that important? Well, it's important and why are people saying it feels fast? Well, it's very obvious why, right? Like, I've used this example before, but there are movies that are 3 hours long that feel like they're 1 hour long or 40 minutes long. Like, for example, Tarantino, for me, Inglourious Bastards and Bastardos Ingloriosos and Django Sin Cadenas. So they're really long movies. They're like 3.5 hours. But if you're plugged in and you're thinking the whole time and there's cognitive activity happening the whole time, it feels short. The perception of speed is really short. And then there are some movies that are 3 hours that feel like 20 hours.
The Irishman.
You can't wait to leave, and you're just watching the clock. Which one?
Did you see The Irishman? It's a Netflix movie, I think, where...
Yeah, the perfect example. And I love Scorsese, but that movie felt so long.
Sí, right? Estaba... En un momento dije, ¿cuánto llevo? Yo 2 horas, estoy chato. 1 hora y me quedan todavía 2 más. Entonces fue lentísimo. Me gustó harto,
right.
sí.
there were great moments in that movie, but it felt very long. And the reason is because there are two things. There's real time and there's perceived time, right? And in real time, it's the same amount of time as Django Sin Cadenas or Bastardos Ingloriosos. But in perceived time, it's way longer because...
sorry. En español le decimos Bastardos sin Gloria.
Okay. I thought it was Bastardos Ingloriosos. Yeah, Bastardos sin Gloria. Yeah, and the big difference is because in the Scorsese movie, you're not like connected to the movie the entire time. Like your mind goes off. You're thinking about, okay, like what did I feed the cat today? Oh, I think I fed the cat, and then you come back to a scene, right? But that doesn't happen in the Tarantino movie for most people, because in the Tarantino movie, from the very first second, Tarantino does this.
You're hooked. Yes.
Right? And he pulls you in, and he does not let you go until the last second of the movie. And maybe not the last one. The last one was slower, I think. No, this was Hollywood. I can't remember. But that's the difference, right? So this is what we do, and this is why we were concerned before the cuarentena, before we started doing online classes. We were concerned because one of our most important variables in our class is to have fast, like we call people refer to them as CrossFit classes instead of like yoga classes, right?
Sure.
And we know how to do that. We knew how to do that live, and we were worried if we could replicate that online. And the truth is that it's worked really well. And sometimes it's even faster. But you have to know how to use the tools. You have to know how to use all the tools available to you in the online experience.
To start wrapping things up, I think that the topic is really dense. Not to mean intense, because there's a lot of variables on. Okay, we have some upside on doing classes online. We also have some downsides in terms of sometimes on the personalization or the bond that we can make with the teacher student. So yo creo que como sociedad vamos a tener que ir cambiando un poco la forma que vemos, quitar de repente el estigma de decir, está tomando una clase online, tanto así como se ha ido perdiendo de repente el valor que tienen quizás las universidades, que ya no es el mismo que había hace 50 años.
Absolutely.
Sí. ¿Quieres agregar algo más? Como que te sientes.
The only thing I think that it's just really important to know is that there are clear disadvantages to doing classes or taking classes online versus taking them in person. There are also clear advantages, what it comes down to in both cases is quality of instruction in any course. Is how excellent is the instruction, and are the students achieving mastery in what they want? Now, in our case, in Cognitive's case, it's that our mastery for us is that our cognitivers in difficult real world conversations are fluent and confident. And we are clearly capable of doing that better than we were, and because we're always improving maybe than we were before we started doing these online classes. And I think I want to say one more thing, which is that we do these monthly encuestas, monthly polls, anonymous polls. Before we do them just about every month, and before cuarentena started and before we went online, we had a 4.75, I believe, was the out of 5 stars. That was our average rating from students anonymously telling us internally what they liked, what they didn't like. And we were concerned that because of the pandemic and because of changing everything online, that would go down, and because of things outside of our control, because people, I don't know, because of quarantena, people are like, I don't know, maybe some people are depressed, they're inside of their houses, they're like, they feel everything's changing, the world's changing, and so for reasons we couldn't control, we expected that their happiness score would go down. The truth is actually that it went up. And it's now like a 4.85 or a 4.8. And I think the reason for that is just because we've got an awesome team. And when things, and this goes back to what I said right in the beginning, when things were really difficult and it was a really hard moment, the team that I've got around me, the people at Cognitive, they did an amazing job at responding to difficulty, and we're better than ever, and it's thanks to the people. That's thanks to the team. They did an amazing job. That's what I think.
That's really great. Thank you, Jordan, for your time. Thank you our listeners. Gracias a todos nuestros escuchas, ya sea en YouTube, en Spotify, Anchor, Breaker, donde sea que nos estén escuchando realmente. Ha sido un tópico súper interesante, creo que da para harto más. Como siempre, nos fuimos por las ramas, como se dice acá en Chile, o nos fuimos por la tangente, ahí para los más matemáticos, como siempre. Muchas gracias por su tiempo, por escucharnos, y nos vemos en el siguiente. Strong.